Welcome to Art and Soul, where I interview creative professionals and how they got started and what they're doing now. Tonight's guest is Kenneth Kall. He's also known as the author Jordan Kennington. He wrote The Fear of Lightning and Dreams of an Eclipse.
Yes.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start briefly. At the beginning, when did you know you wanted to become an author?
You know, I don't think it wasn't really like a conscious moment of like, I want to write books. It's just something that throughout my entire life I've always done. I love to be creative. It just always comes naturally to me.
So when did you start?
Well, man, when did I start actually writing books or just being me?
Oh no, when did you start writing?
When I started writing, I've always done that probably, I don't know, it was probably maybe 8 or 9. I would just actually start kind of writing little things, you know, just kind of like, they were like the little glimmer of where I was going to be later on. And my father, who I don't really talk to that much anymore, but he loves to tell this one story. When I was a kid, I was probably like 9 or 10. And it was the first time that I ever really kind of did anything big. And so we lived in Farmersville, Illinois, and I had, in my bedroom, I created this little stage, and I wrote out these little skits, these little plays, little vignettes, and I had my little stuffed animals and stuff and everything, and I even created little playbills and little tickets, and I went into my parents' bedroom, and I came to the test like, here's your ticket, and here's your ticket, and here's yours, and my sister promptly ripped hers up and didn't come. And I was like, okay. And I had little signed seatings and everything, and my parents came in and all that at the right time, and I just did this little performance for them, this little plays that I wrote. And I don't remember what the plays were about. I just think back now, I'm like, my God, what the... but it's one of my father's favorite memories of me. So that was like the beginning of actually me going into writing the creative forms that I do now.
Right. And so when did you write The Fear of Lightning?
The Fear of Lightning is this version. This is now like the third published version of this book, and is actually just a side story of the original version of The Fear of Lightning, which to this day my Moody has the only surviving copy of the original version of that book, because I lost electronic copies and I printed one for her, and now she won't give it back to me. I actually have to go see her and kind of get it back.
Yes. From her. Yeah. So this is actually just a side story.
Correct.
So what was the original story about?
The original story was about the dynamics of the relationship between Chad and Jason, who, ironically, Jason never made it into this book. Never made it into that book. And it was just all about the story of them trying to building this relationship, and Chad is currently in a very abusive relationship, and morally speaking, it's not something I'm inclined to agree with, but he's kind of seeing Jason on the side. But the reason being is because he's in this very devastatingly abusive relationship, and he doesn't know how to get out. And then he meets Jason, who kind of becomes that, like, what are you doing? Right. He becomes that person that I think a lot of people in abusive relationships, eventually they meet somebody, whether it becomes a romantic sense or just a friend, that kind of opens the eyes for them. Right. Like, wow, wait a minute, you mean there's more outside. So in that original story, there's Don, who's a very good friend of Chad, who kind of saves him. And in the original story, Don and Chad still meet, but it's all years and years past. And Don's dying, so Chad's kind of going back to California. Right. And he's thinking back on all these memories of when he went to California, and then there's the relationship between him and his father. And after I wrote all that, and I finished the book, and I wrote it, and I'm like, okay, this is okay. But then I realized that the real story that I missed, and it set the tone for everything that I wrote later on. The real story in this one was the ramifications of a father who chooses religious beliefs over his family when his sons came out as gay. Right. And it was the dynamic of Chad and his father, Nicholas. And like, this is where the story is. This is the story that I need to tell, not this other... It was okay. It was exactly. So this book actually became a compilation of several short stories that I wrote. I can tell because
you stated that. Okay, so this is The Fear of Lightning, and this is now, people can buy it on Amazon.
Correct.
Barnes and Nobles.
Yes.
And if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can get it for free. Why would you do that when you can own it for like $2.99? I'm just saying. Yes. It's really good. It grabbed me in the beginning, and I am not a lover of fiction. I'm actually a lover of nonfiction, but I read it and I was all over it. Now, with the fear of lightning, you said, right now it's about the story of how a father chooses his religious beliefs over his sons.
Correct.
And it's a really, really good story. Did you do any research?
I did, actually. With that one, there was one point in there where Chad is living out of his car. And, I've been very blessed in my life. I've never really had to go to that extent in my own life.
Right.
So I was kind of curious to know what it's like. I'm like, well, I can't really write about this if I don't know personally. And so I was driving along one day, and this was years ago, and I had this little 89 Mercury Topaz, which is it's not a huge car, but it's not teeny tiny either, but I'm 6'5". So to me, the car was like a little shoebox. I was kind of like putting it on. And I'm just sitting there, I'm driving, I'm like, what would it be like to have to live in this car? In that moment is what really actually inspired the whole idea of Chad living in this car. And I actually did it for a couple of days. I decided to live in my little car, and I had a broken window. It was covered in plastic.
Oh my gosh.
And, and I'm just like...
What time of year?
And this was like in November, and it was cold. And I just remember sitting in my car, just sitting there. Why am I doing this?
November where? Where were you?
In Chicago.
Oh my
the suburb
gosh,
of Chicago.
In Chicago.
Yes.
You could have died.
Possibly. That is a very... But that's the extent that I wanted to go, because I had to know.
Right.
I needed to know what it was like. Because one thing that I like to do in my writing, one very important thing that I always remember is no matter what I write, I need to tell it right.
Right.
And what I mean by that, years ago when I was at Elgin Community College, I got the privilege of being in the Laramie Project. And in the Laramie Project, one of the Catholic priests that Moses Kaufman interviewed, he told him, he said, no matter what you see, no matter what you do, you tell it right.
Right.
And to me, I took that to mean that Moses couldn't put this in his own words. He had to tell this story of this town, the things that they went through, and Matthew Shepard went through, he had to tell it from their perspective through their words. And so that always stuck with me. And that's why when I'm writing my books, I always I have to tell it right. And there are some things that I've written that I myself am like, wow, yeah, I wrote that. Okay, wow. But I had to, because it was part of the story.
Give me an example of that moment.
Oh man. Well, there's in going with the fear of lightning. There's one character, Sharky, and he's not a good person.
Well, his name is Sharky.
His name is Sharky, exactly, and that's his nickname. And I'm going to tell you that's his nickname. I'm not going to tell you anything else about him. He's not a good person, and I had difficulty writing a lot of his parts. And there's one part in particular that I had that he, in order to instill fear into another character, and I'm not going to tell you the specifics about it because you're going to have to wait till you read the book, he described particular acts that he had done. And I remember writing that part, and I remember I was just sitting there, and I had to stop because I couldn't even, I'm just like, I have a very vivid imagination. I'll scare myself. I'm terrified to go swimming because I'm so afraid that I'm going to get attacked by a shark, okay? Seriously, I kid you not. In a 3-foot chlorinated pool. That shark is coming for me. It is coming for me, all right? I would be the first person, but I'll convince myself. So, but there are even things that I, as a writer, I get blocked. So what I end up doing is I can't fathom what this would be like.
Okay.
So sometimes I'll go to the extent of okay, let me see if I can find a way to experience it's like living out of a car.
Right.
But there's some instances I'm like, I'm going to kind of gloss over this. I'm going to give you enough detail. If you really, you'll figure it out.
Right.
And that would be a moment of time where I'm just like, wow, this is,
yeah.
It was disturbing.
Disturbing,
Getting into, especially particularly Sharky was one character that was just so disturbing to get into his mind. But as a writer, it is my obligation because I've introduced you to this character.
Sure.
I've set up expectations for you as a reader that you're going to find out about this character. So what I did with Sharky is I wanted you to hate him.
Oh, okay.
I wanted you to loathe him. I wanted you, because he describes a couple things that he does, and I wanted you as a reader to be absolutely disgusted with him because that's part of who he is. But at the same time, I wanted you to maybe have a little sympathy for him.
Or maybe, yeah.
Or at least a little bit of understanding. So what I knew that I had to do is okay, I got to that point, I've created this character, I had to counter-react it. I was like, you know what? There are people out there like that, and it's very unfortunate, and they are there for whatever their reasons are. but they are still human beings. They're still people. There are reasons why they
Not
ended
good
up where they're.
reasons, but they
Exactly,
are whatever
exactly.
reason.
They're whatever reasons they are there. So with Sharky, I go into that a little bit as well. So the way that I develop his character, I tell a little bit about his own past, because I don't want you to like him. He's not there to be liked at all.
Right.
But I want you to understand, and at least maybe in some small way, realize that, somewhere inside he's still human too.
Right.
So maybe, I guess a little bit of sympathy for him.
Yeah. Okay. Now I know that for the Dreams of an Eclipse, you also did research.
Oh yeah, that book, Dreams of the Eclipse, I actually enjoyed writing that book. But there was one point, so with Dreams of the Eclipse, the main character is Antonio. And the main plot summary for that book is dealing with cultural expectations that are laid down upon people. And Antonio's parents, they're fresh off the boat from Spain. His father gets killed when he's very young. And so for the cultural expectations laid upon Antonio is that it is his to step up, take care of the family, do what needs to be done.
Right.
So he works in the flower shop that his parents had owned, and he runs it with his mother, so kind of keep things going. But on the other side of it, Antonio's gay. But it's something that he doesn't acknowledge because his culture says not acceptable.
Can't do that.
And he needs to grow up, married, have kids, and
Carry it on.
carry it on. Exactly. Carry on. Toe the line, Antonio. So Antonio, to support his family, he has clientele that are men. And I had a difficult time with that. I am I am accepting applications. I'm very monogamous. When I'm in a relationship, it's just me and him and that's it.
Right.
So I had a difficult time understanding, what is that like? Not only to have sex with random strangers and to get paid for it, but how do you even begin to set that up?
Wow.
So I was still living in Chicago at the time, and I went out to this bar. It was Hunter's.
How old were you?
I was I've been 28 or 29.
Wow.
This was right before I met my ex, and I was, I was 30, actually. I was 30 when this happened. And so I was sitting at the bar, and I went back into that corner, and it was kind of dark, and it was a Friday or Saturday, and it was a Friday night, and I had a drink, and I'm just standing there, just thinking, and at that point, I had not yet to really get into that part of Antonio's mind, to really understand, to be able to write from a perspective that is believable.
Right.
So I'm sitting there, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, how in the hell, I'm just like, oh, I don't listen to my drink, and this kind of weird, creepy guy kind of came up, and he was short, he was just kind of bald, and just looked extremely uncomfortable, and he was making me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm
Oh no.
But then something clicked, and I'm sitting there, because he kind of looked at me, and I'm like, don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me, I gotta go. And and I'm sitting there very uncomfortable, and all of a sudden I'm just like, how would Antonio handle this? And that's when things started clicking. So I'm sitting there, I'm just like, oh, you're weird, you're creepy, all right, I don't like you. So he looks at me, he's like, how much?
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like,
what did you do?
How much for what? He's like, how much? And I'm like, I gotta go. And I left. I just bolted out. I'm like, no, because it clicked. I knew what he wanted. But what that did for me, though, I realized, like, wow, Antonio would have ran with this.
Right.
Because this is money.
Right.
And one of the first scenes of where you first meet Antonio, that whole scene of him interacting in the bar is based upon that night. So that creepy little guy of asking me how much made it into my book. So if anybody that knows me, you never know when you're going to make it into one of my books as the character as well.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you apparently are very committed to being a writer.
Tell it right.
Oh, absolutely. Now, where do you get your inspiration for, when you write, where do you get your inspiration?
Honestly, it can come from anywhere.
Yeah.
I'll just be going along, minding my own business one day, and just a random thought will pop into my head, or just an idea. Usually it'll start from a question. Something will inspire a question and think of like, how does that work? What if I did this? What if this happened? Or what if that happened? Like the whole thing with Chad living in a car. What is it like to live in a car? And it just runs from there.
Right.
With Erebus, the book that I'm just finishing up now, I wanted to know what is, how the intricacy of the dynamics of a relationship between a man and his dog, the bond that forms, that goes beyond just any trivial meaning that we can give to it, to a point that, that the dog would lay down their life for this person. How does that work? So that little question, and my own Muddy, who always asks me every time that I finish writing something or I finish a book and I send her, she asks me 2 questions.
What?
Is there a dog and does it die?
Oh!
Every single time.
So, we already know it has a dog.
Yes.
Does it die?
You gotta read the book. You gotta read the book.
Dang it. So I'm going to ask you real quick. What's a common misconception? A misconception.
A common misconception for authors is that we know what we're doing.
So you don't know what you're doing.
I have no clue.
You don't have the story arc.
Nope. 9 times out of 10, when I write a story or I write a book or something like Dreams of an Eclipse, I had no clue what was going to happen in that book.
That's incredible. So what would you say is an accurate perception about authors?
An accurate perception?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of them, but that we're flaky and don't know what we're. Because I can be very flaky and indecisive. I can be very indecisive at times.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I think that's kind of a human trait, really. The other thing I wanted to ask is what obstacles do you have to overcome in writing? And how do you overcome them?
One of the biggest obstacles that I always have to overcome is my lack of self-confidence. It's very difficult. And when I say the lack of self-confidence, it's not writing the story or, putting it out there. It's more so talking to people about it. That I become, that lack of self-confidence really kind of, for me anyway, kind of starts coming through. So when I'm writing the book, that's where it kind of takes effect, my self-confidence. I will start rethinking parts and rethinking like, how are people going to read this? If somebody reads this, like going back to the one instance with Sharky in the book, The Fear of Lightning.
Yes, that one was really intense.
When I wrote that, I went back so many times of like, what are people going to think of me? I wrote this. Right. And because, these books are a reflection of me. I wrote them. I can't deny it, and I'm quite proud of them. But that lack of self-confidence will come through, will seep through, and I always have to come back to tell it right.
Tell it right.
Tell it right.
That's a really good philosophy.
Thank you.
What's your genre?
Mostly GLBT, but I write more so from the implications of decisions that people make. So falling into the GLBT is just kind of arbitrary. The fact that the characters are gay is either, like in The Fear of Lightning, it's just a plot device. In Dreams of Eclipse, it's just another plot device. It's just part of who Antonio is, because it's not the story. For me, the stories where I like to write from it's the implications of the decisions that people make. So like The Fear of Lightning, the father chooses religion over his sons, which I'd make an important distinction between religion and faith in that book, but that's a whole nother show. Yes. Dreams of an Eclipse, it's the decisions that Antonio makes to hide who he really is, which, by the way, Dreams of an Eclipse, for a man to dream of an eclipse means to hide his feminine side, which is perfect for that.
What's up?
So that's where the genre that I like to write from.
Now, tell me briefly about your writing process.
My writing process, it kind of varies. It is. So this is my baby. This is a early 60s, perhaps about a 1962 Smith & Corona typewriter. I wrote the entire first draft of Dreams of Eclipse on this one, and this is actually the first draft of Dreams of an Eclipse. All typed out on this one right here.
That is incredible. Oh my goodness, like some of these words are like 3 words long.
What I do when I write the first draft, I do a typewriter or I do it by hand because I just let it go. I just let it flow. I don't grammar, punctuation, all that stuff is just out the window, and I do recycle.
And look, this is like the other side right here.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. And then you also handwrite.
I do. So this is the first draft of Erebus. This is the book that I'm currently finishing.
That's the entire book of Erebus.
This entire first draft is all written by hand.
Now Erebus is about to be released. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
And you're in your third draft?
I am actually, yes. Give you an idea of some of the process. So that was the first draft. This is actually the second draft where I actually do print it off, and then I go back through and I make all my edits and changes and stuff like that. And again, recycle my paper.
Right.
So I'm into the third draft right now, which I brought this because just to show you, this is the third draft, but even then, these are new chapters. This is additional stuff that I've written to the third draft that's going to be in the book.
Oh, wow.
So my writing process is that I always start from kind of, I guess, as much as I dislike the word organic,
Right.
is really the best way to put it, because doing it by typewriter or doing it by hand allows me to just go,
Right.
because I can't undo it. There's no accidental not
complete
saving.
commitment.
Exactly.
It's absolutely completely
Yes, because
committed.
I could just see it building up and building up,
yeah.
and I see the pages and the clicking, which drove my ex nuts, by the way. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd wake up and just start typing. Sometimes I do it just to irritate him, because
Oh, hey,
he'd
well,
be
see,
stoned
there
or
you go.
something. I'm like, yeah, what's up? Yeah, that's right. You want to go out? Okay. Oh, yeah, you like that? Okay.
Now, how did you get published?
I did it through Outskirts Press, which is kind of, it's self-publishing. So
Okay.
I did most of it up front myself. But I was okay with that, because honestly, when I published The Fear of Lightning, I did it because I wanted to do it. It was a goal that I set, and I just achieved it. And to me, the best pieces of art, whether it's writing, whether it's music, or whether it's business, like Henry Ford, people do it because they want to do it,
Right.
not because they want to do it for everybody else. They want to do it just because they enjoy
Right.
to do it,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
that's the best way it comes out.
So when you're making a title for your book, how do you come up with them?
Most times I usually wait until the book is done, or at least the first draft, because the title to me is extremely important. The title should give you a clue.
Right.
It should entice you as a reader, like, ooh, wait a minute, what's this about? And so, like, both with all my books, like The Fear of Lightning, I chose the title specifically because the fear of lightning is, lightning, when it strikes, it's you don't know where it's going to strike, when it's going to strike, or what it's going to do, because it can be very devastating. So kind of like when things happen in our life, they happen, it's instantaneous, and it can be completely devastating, the outcomes of it. So like the dreams of an eclipse was, when a man dreams of an eclipse, it means he's kind of hiding his feminine side. And that's exactly what Antonio is doing. And it's interesting because the original title of that book was actually going to be The Falsetto Mask. And my editor emailed me. She's like, well, I like the title and I get it, but Antonio doesn't sing. He plays the violin. So
Yeah, maybe
it didn't
not.
work out.
Yeah,
So then I had to think of that one.
exactly.
So the titles, they kind of come to me, usually as the book is usually being done. Excuse me. Erebus is another one that changed many, many, many times.
Really?
Yes.
What was it before?
Originally, it was The Darkness Within, then The
Okay.
Darkness Outside.
The darkness.
Then we just completely dropped that all together. It was my good friend Naya, who I call my platonic soulmate.
Yeah.
She's like, it's kind of overdone a little bit, just a little bit overdone.
Yeah, darkness.
So I came up with Erebus, which in Greek mythology is the land between the living and the dead. And it was perfect because in the book, Adam, he witnesses his mother being killed, and you have to read the book to find out how and why and all those little details. And so Erebus becomes that mythological land that he creates in his mind. And in order to deal with his mother's death, he creates this whole alternate world. And eventually, as the older he gets, he loses himself into that world. And Sasha, the dog, becomes his only real link to reality. And so he creates, the name of his world is Erebus. And he's on this journey to save the Empress, which is actually his mother.
Oh, wow.
So
That's incredible.
thank you.
Now, fiction, these books are not the only things you've written, is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
So if people were interested in reading more of your work, where or how could they read that?
You can go to jrkennington.com. You can also find me on Wattpad, which I just started actually kind of using more so recently. You can find me on Facebook under J.R. Kennington. You can go to my author page, J.R. Kennington.
Yeah.
Basically, just Google J.R. Kennington and I come up everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Now, and then once more, your author name is J.R. Kennington, but your
Correct.
name is
It's
actually Kenneth.
Correct.
All right. Well, I thank you so much for
thank you.
coming.
I love it.
Real quick, Jordan, I want to thank you for joining us on Art and Soul. Our sponsor, the Talent Shopping Network, is going to give you 6 months for being a talent. I know you're interested in acting.
Absolutely,
Recently.
absolutely.
And so they're offering you that. Another shout out. Thank you, Wordscape, for sponsoring the show. Wordscape is now available on iPhone and the iPad. And also special thanks to Jared and Casey and Jeremy because they're awesome. Just saying. Also, if you're on Facebook, go to Art and Soul Trina Fallon. You can like the page and see who's going to come up next, get updates on who's going to be on, learn more things about what's going on in the local Tampa area, and also go to www.starcomstudios.com to get new episodes and blog posts about my guests. Thank you for tuning in.